All right, so hi everyone, Julius here, and welcome back. Today we are going to look at if function and what we call the nested if function. Straight away, I have some examples here that we are going to use. This is the first example that we are going to use. So in this first example, I have the transaction IDs, I have project start date, budgeted amount for the project, and also the actual amount which was spent on the project. The first thing that we want to compute here is to get the variance. To get the variance, we're going to take the actual amount minus the budgeted amount. That will give us the variance. So once I'm done with that, I will just autofill for the variance, and there we go. After that, then we are required to compute the variance status. So to get the variance status, this is simply whether I overspent, whether we're within the budget, or we just spent exactly what we budgeted for. We all know that if the actual amount spent is more than the budgeted amount, then we have what we call an adverse variance for our budget. But if the actual amount spent is less than the budgeted amount, then we have a favorable variance. And if the actual amount spent is equal to the budgeted amount spent, then we have what we call no variance. There's no difference between what you actually budgeted and what we spent. So to get this, we are going to use the if function to help us get this. First of all, it's important to note that if function is a conditional function, or in other words, what is known as logical functions. So to get our variance status, we're going to say equals if. The if function has three inputs. We have the logical test, the value if true, and the value if false. The logical test is the condition that we want to be met. This is our test, the logical test. And of course, for our logical test, we simply need to say that, well, if this variance is greater than 0, if the variance is greater than 0, if it is greater than 0, it means that our actual was more than the budgeted. Yeah, it means that our actual was more than the budgeted. So if variance is greater than 0, comma, then value if true, if indeed the variance is greater than 0, then what do we need? Excel should give us an output of favorable, sorry. If the variance is greater than 0, then Excel should give us a variance of what? Adverse. This should be an adverse variance. This should be an adverse variance. And because it's a text, I will put it in quotations. Because it's a text, I'm going to put it in quotations. Comma, value if false, that means if the variance is not greater than 0, what should I get? A favorable, yeah, because if it's not greater than 0, then it's going to be what? It's going to be favorable. That means that our actual amount spent was actually less than what we budgeted. Yeah, so it's going to be favorable. And I also put that in quotations because it's a text input. And of course, I'm done. I will just execute that and then autofill. I will execute that, then autofill in that order. And there we go. So we have got favorable, 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 adverse, adverse, and all that. But ladies and gentlemen, if you look at this keenly, then you'll realize that there are places where the actual amount is exactly the same as the budgeted, and it gives us a variance which is what? Which is favorable. But that is not true. If the actual amount is equal to the budgeted amount, that means there's no variance, all right? The variance is 0. So what I want is that if the actual amount spent is equal to the budgeted amount, then I don't want either adverse or favorable variance. I only want Excel to give me an output of what? No variance. So in that case, then, we are going to use what we call nested if, because from there, you are starting to realize that we have multiple conditions that we have to meet. We need only to meet one condition, that if the variance is greater than 0, then we have adverse or favorable. No, we want more than 2 outputs. So we're going to make use of what we call nested if. Ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about nested if, we are talking about the use of the if function many times in the same function. Let's get and see it. So I'm just going to edit what I have here. I'm not going to start another function. So we said that if the variance is greater than 0, then that means that the variance is what? Is adverse. So from here, instead of going directly with the value if false, then the value if false here, I will instruct Excel to start another if function so that we look at another condition. So I'll say here once again, if, then the logical test will be the variance is equal to 0. All right. If the variance is equal to 0, if the variance is equal to 0, that means the actual is equal to the budgeted. Then what should that be? That should be no variance. I'm going to enter here, no variance in quotations. No variance in quotes, no variance in quotes, no variance in quotes. Yeah, so that's the only thing that I'm going to fix. And then I execute. Once I execute, then I do what here? I re-autofill. Then I'll execute that, then re-autofill. So clearly, we can see that there's a favorable variance here. Yeah, there's no variance, adverse here, and many others. Yeah, so we have got adverse, favorable, and no variance. That's okay. So let's even look at a more at another example where we can clearly practice the use of the nested if function. So this was only having like two or so. So I want us to look at another example where we're going to use more than 2 of such so that you get to understand the nested if function very well. So here we go. And over here, I have prepared some a sheet here, which you're going to use to understand the nested if very well. So if you look at this is a class sheet, which is recording the performance of students in different subjects. These are assumptions and they are not actual data. So what you're going to do here is that you want to give the grade. We want to get the grade for each and every student. And our grading system that we're going to use is down below here. So you're going to say that any student who has scored between 0 to 49 marks in their mean, they're going to get a grade E. Any student between 50 to 54 will get a grade D. Between 55 to 59 will get a grade C. 60 to 64 grade B, and above 65, that should be a grade A. Once again, to do this, straight away, we're going to use the if function. So this is our mean score here, and here is where we want to get the grade. So I'll say equals if. So logical test is that if the mean, I will start with the very first one, grade A. So if the mean is greater than or equal to, because it is 65 and above, should be grade A. So if the mean is greater or equal to 65, if the mean is greater or equal to 65, comma, value if true. If indeed the student has scored a mean of 65 and above, that should be what? Grade A. I'll put it in quotations, then I put over here A, comma, then value if false, I will set another if function. So if the mean is greater or equal to, if the mean is greater or equal to, next I have 60 to 64, so this is 60. If the mean is greater or equal to 60, if the mean is greater or equal to 60, comma, this should be grade B, this should be grade B, this should be grade B, comma, then value if false, if the mean, I can just type here K2, if the mean is greater or equal to, the third one is 55, comma, that should be grade C, that should be grade C, that should be grade C, comma, then value if false. Once again, I start another if function because I still have 2 more. So if logical test K2 is greater or equal to, next is 50 here, comma, that should be what? Grade D. That should be grade D. That should be grade D, comma, then value if false, being that I only have one condition remaining, which is 0 to 49, so I will say anything that do not fall under any of the previously given conditions should be grade E. So value if false, I'll just put an E. Value if false, E. Value if false, E. Of course, I don't struggle closing brackets because Excel will automatically do that for me. So I don't struggle closing the brackets. I'll just hit on enter. Then I say yes to accept the correction. And there we go. So we have our grading system here. So we have Excel award the grades to our students. We have Excel award the grades to our students. So you can see the first student has scored 51. That is 50 to 54. It's within the range of 50 to 54, giving grade D. If you look at this student, they scored 60. So that is between 60 to 64, grade B. And our grading system is okay. So the use of the nested if function and the if function is very important and will really help you to automate your tasks very easily in Excel. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the use of the if and the nested if function. Thank you very much. Let's meet in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and share. See you in the next video.